Another topic in this session is oral language. This is also very important because, as you know, the end goal of the languages, or one of the four 21st century skills, is communication skills. Oral language is part of the communication skills. So, before we begin this, let me ask you this question. How do children learn to talk? What do they require? Number one is good speaking and listening models. We need to provide our students with good models, an interactive environment. If we want them to develop oral language, we need to allow them to talk. We need to allow them to communicate with each other. Exposure to books and games. We need to let them read aloud with each other, to be able to listen to how these words are being pronounced, games that will allow them to interact with each other and develop their oral language. Then we need to encourage them to play and make believe, dramatize, an introduction to rhymes and song, because this will help them develop and soften their tongue and even their jaw to be able to make adjustments in the way they talk. Another is encouragement. We need to encourage our students to talk in a variety of situations with a variety of people. In some cases, in the classroom, I've been a teacher. Sometimes we just call students, the same students throughout the week, throughout the month, and even throughout the year, because we just want correct answer. We're guilty of that. We are not supposed to do that, because every child is entitled to develop his oral language. Then, of course, another is repetitive language. That's why we use rhymes, we use stories, because this will help our students practice. Then, of course, the purpose of talking. You cannot just ask the students to talk. Okay, children, I've listened to Rose Villanesa telling us to develop the oral language. Okay, children, you talk. No. There should be a purpose in talking. They have to talk on something, so that their talking, their way of developing their oral language is meaningful. And if they are using the mother tongue, it's easy. Give them picture, like what we did earlier. Give them picture and ask them to tell stories. Ask them to talk about the picture in front. That is developing their language competence and their confidence. Give them opportunities to use and practice the language. So what is oral language then? According to speech language, so in speech language pathology terms, speech and language are very different. Speech is the mechanical process involving a coordination of brain, nerves, muscles, and breathing to produce sounds, while language is exchanging meaning using sounds, symbols, words, and groups of words. Example, following instructions, speaking in full sentence, participating in conversation. Of course, speech is more formal, but here we talk about oral language, the language that our students need to be able to participate in classroom discussions, to be able to express themselves, and to be able to understand what they have listened, what they have read, and what they have discussed in the classroom. So what is oral language? At the most basic level, oral language means communicating with other people. Oral language development across the curriculum does not mean teaching children to speak as much as we mean improving their ability to talk or communicate more effectively. To speak in more effective ways requires particular attention and constant practice. This is what I am saying. There should be the purpose of talking. It's not just talking anything. There should be a purpose, because we want our students to develop oral language, and this refers to appropriateness of the word in a particular situation. Okay, let us think about this statement. Shall we read together? The development of language, upon which all learning is built, plays a critical role in students' ability to acquire strong literacy skills, which includes reading, writing, listening, speaking, viewing, and presenting. Therefore, explicit instruction in oral language development provides students with a foundation of comprehending text and communicating effectively. Thus, teachers serve as an essential role in developing students' reading and writing skills. We need to explicitly teach the different genres in oral communication because this will help them better understand later in comprehending or in understanding the text that they will learn to read and later on learn to write. The illustration shows that the foundation to reading comprehension is oral language. With the premise that what you can say, you can read. What you can read, you can write. Therefore, the foundation of reading comprehension is oral language, then to phonological awareness, to phonics, decoding and spelling, and ultimately reading comprehension. That's according to Martha Cummings. What are the 3 criteria for oral language competence according to Holbrook in 1983? Number 1 is fluency. We all know that fluency refers to rate, accuracy, and prosody. So proper articulation of the word, accurateness of how we say the word, and with emphasis, clarity. It should be clear. And of course, sensitivity. We should know the pragmatics of the language because language is also culture. There are terminologies that are not appropriate or that are not acceptable in some other languages. The next is, in what context do we teach oral language? Numeracy. Therefore, we need to develop oral language when we're teaching math, social interaction, literacy, sensory motor, developmental play and centers, show and share, inquiry-based activities, language experiences, content of all learning areas. Oral language should be part and parcel of every learning areas. That should be the basis of all learning because we need to talk first of the concept before we will be able to read about that concept and before we will be able to write about that concept. Therefore, all teachers should encourage oral language development. So what is the relation of language and literacy? Oral language development provides the foundation for literacy development. If you recall, in that diagram that I've shown you earlier, oral language is the foundation to reading comprehension. Literacy acquisition is dependent on oral language ability and skills. So if the oral language of that child is very strong, the child can easily read. I'll give you an example. A child who does not know how to read, who often go to Jollibee or McDonald's, as the child saw the bee, child will say, Jollibee, Jollibee. The child saw this one and say, McDonald, McDonald. But the child does not know how to read yet. But he knows because it's part of his oral vocabulary. So once the child will be able to read Jollibee, you don't need to explain. The child will be able to understand what is Jollibee because it's part of his oral vocabulary. And once he learned to read, that will become part of his reading vocabulary. And once he learned how to write, that will form part of his writing vocabulary. But the first vocabulary that the students form are really the oral vocabulary. Okay? The next is children need to use oral language to develop their powers of reasoning, observation, predicting, sequencing, and other skills connected with reading. Okay? Ask them to express what they observe orally, even before they can read. You can talk of so many things, especially because it is in their mother tongue. See? Show them the picture. They can tell stories about that picture. Ask them to go out. Observe. As they come, tell them what they saw. Let them explain what they've seen when they went out. And ask them to tell something about what they saw. Oral language is an integral part of all learning experiences. Oral language is not taught as a separate component of literacy program. It is embedded. In fact, it is the foundation. It is a component of all content areas. Oral language standards, objectives, and enabling outcomes are part of the language art curriculum from grades 1 onward. So what are oral language activities? Okay? So we have listen and do, TPR activities, listening and doing word lists, hearing and responding to word. Example, when you hear the word dog, listening to stories, game use in either listening and speaking, using pictures, using the themes of the week. Then later on, we have listen and say, sentence pattern. And this is very, very important in English. We just ask them to follow. Ask the pattern. My name is. Then they just fill in the gap. Okay, I am 5 years old. That's oral language development. Okay, and then ask them to recite rhymes and songs for them to practice and develop that language, oral language proficiency. Fellow grade 1 teachers, these are few of the many activities that we can use to develop oral language, be it in the mother tongue, be it in Filipino and English, and I hope that you will be able to use this. The pictures that we use to develop oral language in the mother tongue can be used in developing oral language in Filipino. They just use another language, and even in English. What is important is to be able to provide them with the materials that they need to be able to develop oral language. Sentence frame, sentence patterns. These are important. And another very important and crucial that we should remember is that oral language should be taught explicitly, especially with L2 and L3. There should be modeling. There should be guided practice. And there should be scaffolding as we allow them to transition and allow them to do independent practice. Thank you. And